Ah, I don't want to have to say this one, y'all. But Alcorn State knocked off Texas Southern to take a hold of the third seed in the SWAC men's basketball standing. But the fallout and impact of that game reaches beyond just these two teams. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Go to the Gametime app, download it, and use the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your first purchase if you just created an account. Now, we'll wrap up today's with a look at Joseph Eichelberger, Jackson State hitter who is numero uno in the nation, not the SWAC, but the nation. Prior to that, we'll keep it at Jackson State because JSU's women's basketball team is so dominant and has been so dominant for so long that we may fall into the trap of not acknowledging and appreciating what we're witnessing with our own eyes in real time. But let's reflect. Let's look back at an outcome that I didn't want to be true, but I want to look at the three teams that are most affected by the Texas Southern versus Alcorn men's basketball outcome. If you don't know, my Texas Southern Tigers fell to the Alcorn State Braves. It was a really good game, came down to the wire, a true back and forth second half. And we've seen that a couple of times. We've seen that a couple of times with Alcorn over the year, and they came out victorious, I should say, especially over the last 2 weeks, but 2 games, sorry. But this one was tough because it was a really good shot by Jeremiah Kendall with about 10, 11 seconds left in the game. It was a nice post move. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was an easy shot. I wouldn't say it was good or bad defense, but it wasn't an easy shot that Kendall made, and he came down with it. And that put them up by 1 point. So now TSU comes down. They got 11 seconds left. They drive. They get a good shot. I think they had a good penetration and kick out to the corner, and I thought P.J. Henry had a good look. I don't think the ball was tipped. I don't think it was partially blocked or anything. At least from my eye view, it didn't seem to be. But then when you look at what it looked like afterwards, well, that looks like it got blocked because it was short from the corner, and PJ Henry is a good shooter. So it was a little bit disappointing to see that, but that's how the game ended. And then Alcorn just went ahead and got some free throws to really close it out, but that was it. TSU didn't knock down their big shot. Alcorn did. Alcorn came up victorious, and with that, they now have a 1-game lead on TSU. They avoided the season sweep, but most importantly, they have a 1-game lead because I guess they're both kind of important depending on how you look at it. But when you look at TSU, they had a higher ceiling than Alcorn did. And because Alcorn won this game, there's 3 teams that are affected. I'm not going to look at Grambling because Grambling wasn't truly affected by this game. Grambling did clinch the SWAC, though, on Monday night. And we'll look at that on tomorrow's episode. Grambling's conference championship will be acknowledged probably as the opener on Wednesday's episode or Thursday's episode, excuse me. But I want to kick it off with the first team that really was impacted as a team that wasn't even in the matchup, and that's the Southern Jaguars, because they're extremely thankful to Alcorn. Because Alcorn defeated TSU, Southern was able to remain as the 2nd seed in the SWAC. That would not have been the case if TSU had came out victorious. And that is because Southern has the tiebreaker over Alcorn, but they do not have the tiebreaker over TSU. So when I was first previewing this game on Friday, I talked about how this was a matchup for the number 3 seed. And at the time, that's all it was. But then on Saturday, Southern lost. So now they also had 5 losses. Now you had 3 teams who had 5 losses, and 2 of those teams faced off. Those 2 teams were Alcorn and TSU. Because Alcorn won and they don't have the tiebreaker over Southern, Southern was able to remain comfortable at their number 2 seed. But now let's look at Alcorn. Alcorn is a big winner. I do think that Southern is the biggest winner because they have the highest remaining seed due to the outcome. But Alcorn is a major winner here because whole time I have previewed this and kind of promoted this as a battle for the 3 seed in the SWAC. Even though there was room for more growth for TSU, for Alcorn, that was essentially all it could be unless Southern also lost. Had Southern also lost, then Alcorn would have jumped up to the number 2 seed. But Alcorn is the hottest team in the conference right now, and they're sitting alone at number 3. And as long as they continue winning, they won't drop any lower than 3. Only 2 games left in the season, but as long as they win out, they will at worst be your 3 seed and possibly be your number 2 seed, depending on what Southern does. Alcorn has won 7 games in a row. They've had a big victory over Jackson State, a big victory over Texas Southern, a big rally. I wouldn't call it a big victory because PV hasn't been great, but it was a nice rally towards the end of the second half to really pull away. Originally, PV actually had a little bit of a lead, and I was looking like, oh, here we go. Because I'm thinking, all right, if PV wins, that puts Alcorn down. I'm in fan mode. I decide when I get to go to fan brain and when I got to get to media brain. But I was watching that game with fan brain, so much fan brain, I said, I'm turning this crap off. I had just watched TSU beat Jackson State, and I'm like, oh, yeah, let's see what PV going to do. You know, they might be good for something. They ain't good for nothing. PV ain't good for a doggone thing. But when it comes to TSU, the route to the 3rd seed is still wide open. But unfortunately, due to losing, there's a little bit more volatility. Because had you won, you would have been the 2nd seed. But because you lost, you're 4 with a potential to drop down to 5 at the end of the year, depending on how your outcome goes. TSU has to beat PV. Texas Southern has to knock off the rival Prairie View A&M Panthers in the last game of the season. TSU is one of few teams in the SWAC that only has 1 game left. And because of that, they get to take a little bit of a load off on Saturday. They don't have to play. They get an entire week off before they play PV. PV gets that same, so it's not an advantage or anything, but you do get to sit back and watch other people hopefully fall. And that's where the route comes in. I know that TSU fell to Alcorn, but the route towards the number 2 seed isn't even illogical. But the route to the number 3 seed is even more realistic because all you have to do is let Southern or Alcorn lose a game. I understand that TSU just lost to Alcorn, but they actually have the tiebreaker due to point differential. Same thing with Southern. So if Southern loses a game, if Alcorn loses a game, and TSU wins their finale, TSU at worst will be the 3 seed. If both of those teams lose, then TSU will be the 2 seed. That's the benefit. Texas Southern has the tiebreaker on the teams that they need to. Grambling, no, they don't. So I understand that TSU fell to Alcorn, but that's okay. They're currently at the 4 seed. If they can just win the finale, I think it's extremely realistic that they could be the 3 or even the 2. All they need is Southern to lose 1 game. All they need is Alcorn to lose 1 game. If either of those things happen, they're the 3 seed. If both of those things happen, they're the 2 seed. Southern has Bama State and Alabama A&M. Alcorn has Mississippi Valley State and UAPB. I do think it's extremely realistic that Alcorn or Southern could lose one of their final 2 games, with PV being the only game left for TSU. Fingers crossed, right? But as we push forward, there's no fingers crossed here. Jackson State women's basketball team is dominant and has been dominant. But sometimes when people have been dominant, we begin to take their dominance for granted. And I won't allow that to happen for the Lady Tigers as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the best place for your last-minute tickets of any kind. Any venue that you want to go to. Maybe you want to go to wrestling. Maybe you want to go to an MMA event, maybe a boxing event, right? Maybe combat sports are just your thing. If not, maybe you want to go to a football event. The UFL is going to be coming up soon. Maybe there's a UFL team in your local area. Even if you're not into sports fully, maybe you just like listening to me because you're a fan of me. Thank you. I love you for that. And for that, I'm going to reward you with another option, which is the ability to go to the play, to go to a comedy show, to go to a concert. I just recently looked up a concert of a major artist in the local area as a gift for my lady. It's just that simple. All you have to do is go to the Gametime app, download it, create an account if you're new, right? If you aren't new, then you already have an account. But if you're new to Gametime, then create an account, use the code LOCKEDON, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. That easy. Just go to Gametime and download the app. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you check it out, Locked On Sports Today, the first of its kind live 24/7 sports network on YouTube. Go check out what they're playing right now. No matter when you're listening to me, as soon as I'm done, gonna be something to do on. And I got a clear statement for you. We should not take Jackson State women's basketball's era of dominance for granted. We should acknowledge it. We should appreciate it. Because on Saturday, Jackson State won the SWAC for a 5th year in a row in the regular season. And sometimes when you win the conference that many years in a row, people begin to feel like it's a foregone conclusion. And I'm guilty of it. Because when you look at the story of David and Goliath, are we looking at David or are we looking at Goliath? Not just the point of view of the story, but who are we focusing on? I would argue that 97% of people are probably focusing on David. But what happens when David doesn't beat Goliath? Because this isn't a book. You can't write your own ending. Sometimes Goliath remains dominant. Sometimes David is not able to overcome the odds. But when Goliath wins again and again, it doesn't suddenly become a less captivating story. Maybe it's not the end result you wanted. And I had looked at the UAPB game. I had looked at the Southern, the Grambling. I spent this whole season looking for a David that could go against the Goliath, a reasonable David that could go against a Goliath. None of them stood, and I wouldn't say none of them stood up to them, but none of them were able to come out victorious. They got another UAPB game going on, and I'll be watching that closely. But even myself, I became a little too captivated with watching David, trying to see if Goliath could be slayed. It hasn't happened yet. They've won their 5th consecutive SWAC regular season title. And the way that they did it, I believe, is what really is important. Not that either way you shouldn't acknowledge it, but they did it in a way where you had to notice. It's been a sad day for TSU. I'm really talking about some TSU L's today, aren't I? But Jackson State knocked off the Texas Southern Lady Tigers by 50 points. And it was the signature win of the season for them, in my opinion. 101 points, the most points they had scored all year, JSU. 51 points for TSU. They were 1 point away from doubling the score. This was embarrassing. But luckily, it was also a great moment for Jackson State, so I don't have to focus on how embarrassing it was for my ladies. We rolling, we trying to get things turned around. I get it. But Jackson State defeated a team by 50 points in a dominant victory to clinch the SWAC for the 5th year in a row. And even if you wanted to say it was a foregone conclusion, they weren't supposed to beat nobody by 50. I don't care if it's Jackson State versus whoever. There's no team in the conference you're supposed to beat by 50, or we expect you. That's a big deal anytime that it happens. And I don't know, maybe they just love going against the Texas teams because the only other victory that they had over 30 points was against PV earlier in the season. I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to take a shot at PV to make myself feel better. I don't know. But this is about Jackson State. This is about JSU and the fact that Goliath has remained standing tall. We've seen multiple people take on that role of David. We've seen multiple people be recasted, whether it was UAPB, whether it was Southern, it was Grambling, it was Texas Southern, maybe it was Alabama A&M. We've seen it, FAMU. We've seen these people be recast and every single person try to be David, but the director never feels like they have the right David. And you know what? We might not even see this movie be done. Because I don't know what happens this Saturday. I'll be watching closely, but I'm no longer going to watch through the prism of I can't wait to see if somebody can knock off Jackson State. Because by doing that, I'm not appreciating the greatness that we're seeing. I don't know how long Coach Reed is going to be at JSU. People are knocking on her door, bring, ringing a line every single off season. I don't know how difficult that is for her to say no. But I understand that the temptation is there. I understand that the offers are on the table. And if Coach Reed decides, yeah, I think I want to move on from Jackson State, she will have a job. Nobody questions that, whether you're with JSU or not. Nobody questions that Coach Reed will have a job if she decides she wants to move on. And there will be people who are wanting her. She will be some people's number one option. I don't know how long she'll be here, how long she'll continue to say no. We need to appreciate it as long as it's there. We need to appreciate Coach Reed because I know Moki at LSU was saying things about, yeah, that's one of the most talented people at the coaching position in women's basketball. She acknowledges it. She stamps it. And she may leave at any moment. We need to appreciate it, not out of fear that, oh, you'll miss her when she's gone. This isn't, I know a lot of people feel that way about Willie Simmons. You should have appreciated him while he was here. This isn't that. It's not about keeping her. It's about acknowledging what's happening. What is happening right now is 5 years in a row of being the best team in the conference. In 2020, there was no conference tournament because the pandemic ended that. So they didn't win the SWAC tournament that year. But let's just say that that was the supreme title. 4 years in a row they won previous to this. They had won the most highest honor 3 of those 4 years. Last year they got upset. But they were the best team. And I know people got mad. How did the best team, they didn't win? The best team does not always win, especially in a single elimination situation. But they were the best team far and wide. And I'll be honest with you, I hope that they win it out. I hope they win out the regular season. I hope that they win out in the tournament, because when you look at what they've done, what they've accomplished, I believe that you could see them again being a 14 seed. They were the 14 seed 2 years ago when they faced LSU in that monkey game I was just speaking about. They were the number 14 seed then. It's rare, but the resume that they're putting together, knocking off teams by 50 points. Listen, I told you, Dukes. I told you, Mr. Dukes, I was not going to duck any smoke. I was going to speak about it. It's not the largest part, but they beat my girls bad. 50 points. You're knocking off teams by 50 points. I think you average a 20-point margin of victory. This is ridiculous. I don't care about competition level. All of that can go by the wayside. I think that Jackson State has the chance to be a 14 seed, and they built their team to be a 14 seed and be able to knock off a number 3 seed. So I ain't gonna lie to you. My girls ain't got no chance in this. I want to see Jackson State go out and pull off a major upset, something that has never happened. I don't think it happened last year, unless if it happened last year, it was the first time ever, but something that's rarely happened in women's basketball NCAA tournament history. Now, as you push forward, we're going to keep it in Jackson, Mississippi, but we're going to switch over to the Diamond. Moving on from the court to the Diamond, because Joseph Eichelberger is one of, if not the best hitter in the nation, and numbers would say he's numero uno. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, and eBay Motors is the #1 place for you trying to fix your car. Now, maybe you have a 2004 Honda Accord. Let's just go with the Honda Accord. That's my favorite one to bring up. And you want to go ahead and put some things together to make it run into peak performance. All you have to do is put your car in the My Garage section. You'll know exactly which pieces are able to fit your car, guaranteed, because there's over 122 million parts on there. So they have the part for you. There's no question about that. They have it. Now, it's up to you if you want to fix your car up. Maybe you just want to make it look better. Maybe you want to ride in style. It's not just about performance. It's about how you look when riding in the car. That's fine too. All you have to do is go to ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Put your car into the My Garage section. Go ahead and find the part that fits for you, and it is a guaranteed fit. Go to ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Joseph Eichelberger is arguably the best hitter in the nation. I'm not saying in the SWAC. I'm not saying the best hitter at Jackson State. We expanding. We bigger than that right now. We're looking at the nation. That's everybody. SWAC, MEAC, ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ASUN, like everybody. Jackson State's left fielder, Joseph Eichelberger, is number 1 in 3 major statistics when it comes to hitting. He's batting .639 right now. The next closest person to him is .571. His on-base percentage is .717. The next closest person is .673. He averages 2.3 hits per game, and that leaves him tied at number 1 with Dylan Palmer out of Hofstra. I'm speaking about, y'all hear what I'm saying? I'm speaking about the nation. These are numbers in rankings that we would commend and I mean highly commend him for achieving in the SWAC. And there's nothing wrong with that. Let's not get it twisted. When I say we're expanding, we're doing bigger, literally a conference is not bigger than the nation. Let's not get into this self-hatred or we acknowledging nationally first. The fact of the matter is, if I'm the best person in my city and I'm the best person in my state, which one do you think we're going to acknowledge? If I'm the best person in Texas, let's say I'm the best podcaster in Texas, but I'm also the best podcaster in America. Don't you think we're going to say I'm the best American podcaster, not I'm the best Texan podcaster? Because we're speaking geographically, it's just a bigger area. I've had this conversation before, and some people tried to say it was like self-hatred and looking for outside validation. It's nothing of the sort. There's just more people to compete with when you expand your region. That's it. And we are on the biggest region that we can nationally. When we're talking about NCAA baseball, it doesn't get any bigger than the nation. And when I say it doesn't get any bigger, there's nobody else I can go get, which means there's nobody who's better than Joseph Eichelberger when it comes to getting on base, when it comes to averaging the most amount of hits per game, and then also just pure batting average. Because I was going to do this for Feature Friday, but it's Tuesday right now, going into Wednesday. I said, I don't want any of the numbers to change. I want to make sure I have everything. I want to hit this immediately. Eichelberger is 10 games into the season. This is not some player who is new to it. 10 games into the season. The squad is 9-3. So they played more games than he played in, right? But the squad is 9-3. Eichelberger is 10 games into the season. And they're successful. But then also, you want to hear, oh, they're going against this team or that team, and the talent level, the competition. We just spoke about this when it came to JSU women's basketball. And I understand that's coming. I understand where that's coming from. But that's why when you have a game against Mississippi State, you go out and you do what Eichelberger did. And what Eichelberger did was he had 3 at-bats, had 2 hits, one of which was a home run, his first home run of the season. 2-run home run, by the way. Then he had a single in the second, 2 RBIs on that. On the game, they scored 6 points. Scored 6 runs. You could look at Eichelberger for being responsible, as far as RBIs go, for 4 of those runs. He was a key contributor. In football, we always speak about money games being flipped into get money games, which means when you go against a team that you're supposed to lose to and they're paying you to come out, and it's just a bigger school, right? If Jackson State was facing Mississippi State in football, we would say this is a get money game because these players have the opportunity to jump on a radar because people are looking at Mississippi State players. The same thing applies here. When you come in and you're playing SEC competition and you go 2 or 3 at base or at bat, knocking your first home run of the season, and you drive in 4 RBIs, that's a great performance. And no one's speaking about, well, you're facing Mississippi Valley State. Nah, take that Valley out. We're facing Mississippi State. You can try to discount it. You can try to downplay it, but you can't. And I think that was a great game. His second best game, arguably, of the season. His first best game against Mississippi Valley State. Because in that game, he had four hits, 4 at-bats. He was walked twice. So I guess you could say he was on base 6 times, of sort. 5 runs on the game. So of the times that he reached base, he ended up scoring on 5 of those 6 attempts. This was a very efficient game. This is a player who this was a great game. They won like 23-1. They blew him out. It was ridiculous. But that was a great individual performance by him. But I think more than anything else, when you're ranking this way nationally and you're an HBCU, people are ready to discount you. And I understand they'll say that's just one game, but you can't take that one game away from them. And you also need to acknowledge it. So going to wrestling soon. In the words of Roman Reigns, y'all need to acknowledge Joseph Eichelberger. Now, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports today. On tomorrow, we'll be back to discuss Grambling, because Grambling is your 2024 SWAC men's basketball champions. And let's acknowledge how it doesn't matter and they can't lose any tiebreakers, and also how they got here. I can't wait for this show on tomorrow's episode. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. In the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on X or Twitter. Don't like X. You can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.